Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Pollack, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Welcome to another edition of the Goldwater Report. Thanks again for tuning us in, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it. We'd like to welcome the new subscribers to our YouTube broadcast channel, and we hope we can live up to your expectations regarding what broadcast editorial and news reporting should be, instead of what it has devolved to become, namely, a bunch of inconsequential drivel that you do not need to know. We'll remind our audience that this anchor desk doesn't come onto the airwaves unless it's timely and important to deliver content that is actually rooted in reality, using critical analysis about what the American public is being subjected to by the propaganda journalism business, whether it's the socialist, fascist major media or the quote-unquote patriot, freedom, liberty movement, alternative media, all of which has sold out to pop culture fear pornography as the main diet for content. It is nihilism, ladies and gentlemen, and the nihilism is all pervasive. It runs through the entertainment business, the advertising business, the movie business, the music business, and when you marry that to the news, quote-unquote news media business, which it's not really news, it's propaganda, you have nihilism. And that's the way this is being rolled out. Again, I'll repeat, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't hear it from this anchor desk, I can assure you, you don't need to pay attention to it. Turn it off. Go about your lives. Do the best you can. Nothing is going to stop these people from trying to influence you. If you're a news junkie, it's time to be aware that you are subjecting yourselves to something which this anchor desk has aptly labeled as the church of the media. And if you're going to subject yourself to that, be aware it's designed to have the effect of leading you to being dispirited and despairing of your future. It's designed to provoke you to an opinion, not to inform you of anything meaningful. The journalism business has welded the TV and radio propaganda into the internet as one big social context, and I'm here to tell you that it has nothing to do with reality. Our advice, again, don't watch it. It won't help you earn money or stop you from being taxed to death by knowing anything of it. It's absolute garbage. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no racial problems in America as being described by the Democratic Party Corporation franchise. When I was downtown last night, there weren't black people against white people in the streets. In fact, blacks and whites were all over the place partying like nobody's business, walking on the same sidewalks, going to the same bars and restaurants. They weren't looking at each other with suspicion. Now, what was previously scheduled for this broadcast was a factual discussion on trade and tariffs. The next broadcast scheduled was the victimization of Dewana Hooper Breedlove. Instead, we find ourselves here because of the noise coming over the propaganda channels, which interrupted our information delivery. And it has to be addressed. When Mrs. Clinton was absolved of being indicted, people were calling me, asking me what was I going to say, and for the time being, I was speechless. I couldn't believe the audacity I witnessed, and then the noise, yet again, began to soar. So, ladies and gentlemen, since the last time we have been on the air, let's take an audit of what has been broadcast as important content by the 24-hour quote-unquote news business, which is anything but properly formatted news delivery. Moreover, it is selective fact and or agendized propaganda masquerading as news reporting. It's garbage content or infotainment or advertorial, take your pick, and it's sickening. It's absolutely sickening to behold. Fear pornography, nihilism, garbage. You walk out your back door, you go to the store, is Black Lives Matter in your face, yelling at you about white privilege? Well, the answer to that is obviously not. But anyways, so here's the audit of what we've been watching. In no particular order, and not a complete list. Istanbul airport explosions, 36 dead, 147 injured. May through July 5th. In May 8th, attacks in Iraq by suicide bombers and car bombs, killing 189. July on the 5th, another car bomb explosion, killing 150. June 28th, a terrorist attack in Kashmir, 8 people injured, and another uprising there in clashes with security forces, killing 21. Early June, several attacks in Israel, including stabbings and shootings, killing more than 5. A recent report of clashes in South Sudan, leaving dozens of people dead in its wake. Several reports of police violence against black civilians in America. Those reports actually originated from social media camera phone uploads of officers being caught in the act of allegedly exercising undue force during the course of an arrest or traffic stop. People rushing to judgments and making all kinds of assumptions without having all the facts. The recent attack in Dallas, then, killing 5 police officers and wounding several others. Subsequent to that, incident reports of fatal shootings of more officers throughout the country. Reports of 900 separate incidents of police brutality. Reports of black killing blacks on the south side of Chicago over drugs sales turf. Several reports of public official corruption. Congressional representatives staging a sit-in on the floor of the House of Representatives trying to force more gun legislation. The Prime Minister of Israel being accused of money laundering. Hillary Clinton being let off for email investigation is absolved of violations of the Espionage Act, Title 18, Section 973, subsection F of the U.S. Code. Roger Ailes of Fox News being accused of sexual assault. The president coming onto the airwaves from Poland to incite yet more racial division by virtue of the remarks in a speech citing statistics out of context and completely false in that context. Several weather-related incidents of floodings, volcanic activity, drought, and tornadoes. There's plenty more, but mainly it's all the same thing and aimed to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to tell you to be scared. very scared for your very lives when you walk out the door to go to work or to the movie or shopping or whatever activity you want or need to perform outside your home. Run out and buy a gun as quick as possible because you're going to need it. Now here's the propaganda narratives being employed with all this dribble. The gun control debate, the war on terror, the Black Lives Matter organization protests and Black Lives Matter, as if nobody else's lives matter, just theirs. The Black Panther organization narrative, race baiting by the fear-mongering celebrities, the war on drugs, the white privilege debate, the 1% over the 99%, and now the war on cops. I could go on, but you get the general picture. Meanwhile, as all of this is going on, for most people, including homeowners who are working, near 50% of your income is leaving your pocket in aggregate taxes without your actual cognitive consent, and leaving this anchor desk to ask the question, where is the value being displayed from this form of governance in return for the taxes being confiscated? How come for those receiving Social Security, their Social Security benefit is being taxed? There's other questions that could be asked about this confiscation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll repeat again, this is a soap opera being broadcast by the Church of the Media, the fascists and their socialist minions of the journalist broadcast channels. If this was actual reality, you'd think the whole world was coming to an end, but the actual reality is, it's just not true. Ask yourselves, how many folks of the Black Lives Matter organization are actually involved in the hijacking of the 24-hour journalism cycle? Would you say that there's tens of thousands per incident involved in all these demonstrations, or just a few hundred here and there? There's been plenty of reports that link funding for this group to the billionaire George Soros. In fact, one could ask the question, is Mr. Soros trying to have an effect on the currency markets for his hedge fund's benefit? It's recently been reported that he's personally back at the helm of his hedge fund after a 2-year hiatus. Mr. Soros trying to crash the dollar? He won't be able to, you know. We know Mr. Soros is a backer of Mrs. Clinton and that he wants her to be the next president. You know, the open society and all of that. Does anyone find it interesting that right after FBI Director James B. Comey Jr., and by the way, off the script, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you know it, but James B. Comey Jr. uses the Critical Post as a web reference. Go to his Zoom Info profile, look him up, and you'll see the Critical Post right there as a web reference for Mr. Comey. But that James B. Comey Jr., whom did something completely unprecedented with his press conference last week, by coming out with a recommendation to not prosecute Mrs. Clinton, instead of Loretta Lynch receiving the report and making the announcement herself that as soon as there was a propitious event of police brutality spurred by a social media outrage as a result of some uploads onto YouTube, that all attention was diverted to this, and that as well, some unstable black male just happened to decide to open fire on the Dallas Police Department who were protecting Black Lives Matter protesters. Anybody find that interesting? The next thing we see is a lot of copycat incidences by lawless blacks in various other parts of the country. Does anyone know about the book that's just been released by Heather McDonald whose research cites the actual statistics of crime in America and how it's being twisted to satisfy the political agenda of the Democratic Party socialist fascist regime in this country. Their minions are employed by the millions by an overwhelming majority throughout the government corporate structures across the entire American landscape, including the federal government. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, there's more police brutality committed against the white population in this country than against blacks. Do you see a White Lives Matter movement? A Christian Lives Matter movement? Where's all the propaganda about that? Conversely, there's more crimes committed by blacks and Latinos and others in this country than by whites. Here's a brief overview of crime in this country. And if you want to read the statistics for yourselves, as compiled by the quote-unquote Department of Justice under the current sitting president, it will be available as a free download underneath this broadcast on the head page of the Critical Post Chicago. One of the tables can be used for a number of interesting calculations. First, we find that during 2012 through 2013 period, blacks committed on an average of 560,600 violent crimes against whites, whereas whites only committed 99,403 such crimes against blacks. This means blacks were the attackers in 84.9% of the violent crimes involving blacks and whites. This figure is consistent with reports from 2008 that the last year the DOJ released similar statistics. Perhaps not coincidentally, that was the year this president was elected. When blacks are stopped by a police officer, how many of them open up their mouths in an aggressive and abusive manner during a car stop, for instance? Can we find a statistic for that? Perhaps the body cameras are going to help us at this point. Let's see how officers are being treated by the black community during car stops or other kinds of stops. Interesting. We find that violent interracial crime involving blacks and Hispanics occurs in almost exactly the same proportions as black on white crime. Blacks are the attackers 82.5% of the time, while Hispanics are attackers only 17.5% of the time. Some observers argue that what causes the overwhelming preponderance of black on white over white on black violence is chance of encounter, due to the fact that there are 5 times as many whites as blacks in the American population. However, there are only about 30% more Hispanics than blacks, yet black on Hispanic violence is almost as lopsided as black on white violence. This suggests blacks may be deliberately targeting both whites and Hispanics. Using figures for the 2013 racial mix of the population, 62.2% white, 17.1% Hispanic, 13.2% black, we can calculate the average likelihood of a person of each race attacking the other. A black is 27 times more likely to attack a white and 8 times more likely to attack an Hispanic than the other way around. An Hispanic is 8 times more likely to attack a white than vice versa. We can also calculate how often criminals of each group choose victims of other races. It's indicated when whites commit violence, they choose fellow whites as victims 82.4% 4% of the time and almost never attack blacks. Blacks attack whites almost as often as they attack blacks, and Hispanics attack whites more often than they attack any other group, including their own. Those are facts, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the statistics from the Department of Justice. Now, if you want the facts, get Heather McDonald's book, The War on Cops. Don't rely on the propaganda coming over the airwaves. She comes well accredited. She works for the Manhattan Institute. Don't rely on what's coming over the airwaves. It's garbage. It's skewed. It's a lie, and it has nothing to do with reality. It's just members of the church of the media making a healthy living from advertisers while engaging you, or trying to influence how you will vote in the upcoming presidential election cycle. When are the good people of America going to realize that voting for any franchised candidate from whatever political franchise currently operating in this toxic mix of confusion by the church of the media, when are they going to realize it's failed to deliver anything of value to the unwitting, tax-paying public? When are the people receiving government handouts going to get off their butts and do something productive with their lives, or at least try, instead of sitting on their butts and relying on the government to provide them sustenance? When are people going to start reading and doing their own research? When are they going to learn how to use the internet for research? When are they going to realize when they're reading garbage and agent provocateur garbage at that, instead of an actual fact? There's a lot of questions that can't be answered, ladies and gentlemen, because the system is designed to collapse the society into a muddled mess, while people who act like lambs being led to the slaughter repeat what they see rather than think for themselves. Again, as you look around the country, do you see Black Lives Matter in your backyard? Can you believe that there's any law in this country? Well, there might be law for you. But if we take last week as an example, apparently there isn't any law for people who are in political power. And the wheels of justice that grind in the investigations to find the corrupt politicians, like Mrs. Clinton, and everybody else sitting in Washington, D.C., who seem to be swimming around in their own bubble and talking amongst each other and using celebrities as part of their mix, repeating their mantras. The laws don't apply to them. They vote themselves raises every year. When is this public going to wake up and vote for anything but somebody that belongs to a political franchise? Probably not in my lifetime. Don't watch what you see coming over these channels. Don't watch it. It's garbage. It doesn't mean anything. It contributes nothing to you being able to make a living. It contributes nothing to the betterment of your soul. This morning, I'm sitting there watching ABC, and right after they had their little program, This Week, They had this guy, I don't remember seeing it before. They had this guy by the name of Joel Osteen doing an infomercial for his ministry for over an hour. I was simply amazed. Is this what we've come to expect from the news broadcast networks in this country? Infotainment. Advertorial. That's what's going on. It's garbage. Don't watch it. And do the best you can. And make a living for yourself. Take care of your families. Don't pay attention to this garbage. And be aware that there's about 60 to 70 million Americans in this country that are stupid enough to vote for that witch who, no doubt, is a white-collar criminal. And she just got off scot-free. Everybody's going to forget about this whole email thing. Black Lives Matter, huh? Well, here's something for all you Black Lives Matter and you, the people in Anonymous and all you egalitarian provocateurs. Your lives don't matter any more than any of the rest of us. That's a fact. And why don't you tell your friends and neighbors to quit buying drugs from each other and fighting over turf? Black Lives Matter. Why don't you quit hanging out at the 7-Eleven and do something useful with yourselves? Black Lives Matter. How many of you are being paid by George Soros at $15 an hour to rabble-rouse across this country? You're still listening to your friends. What's his name? The minister Louis Farrakhan, that race baiter. Al Sharpton, that race baiter. How about Jesse Jackson, that race baiter, and all the white race baiters on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC? How about all those? Huh? Bunch of race-baiting garbage. And you, people in the Black Lives Matter movement, you believe it. Well, you're a bunch of dummies. As for the rest of you, ladies and gentlemen, like I say, there's a lot of questions to be answered because the system is designed, the way the media is being delivered is designed to try and collapse this society into a muddled mess. Again, this is Scott Pollock, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Thanks again for tuning in to another Goldwater Report. We'll be back as soon as possible. Please share this broadcast with a friend who may find it useful. That is all.